Ed, I'd love to start with you, just because it's been 30 years since this first movie, The Brothers McMullen. I just kind of wanted to ask about the process of bringing the sequel to life and like why you felt like now was the time to release it. Was the idea for this movie kind of something you always had in the back of your mind, or did it just kind of come together recently?
No, so 10 years ago, 10 years ago, I saw Rick Linklater's Before Midnight, right? And
Ooh.
that's his second sequel to Before Sunrise, which was at Sundance the same year that me and Connie were there with Brothers McMullen. So I thought, I had not quite honestly given any thought to a sequel, and it was that seeing that movie that kind of inspired the idea. So I tried to write a script to get ready in time for the 20th anniversary, and I quite honestly I couldn't crack it. I didn't know what the story was I wanted to tell with these characters again, so I just kind of put it on the back burner. Then 5 years later, I read an article about kids in their 20s who are kind of being forced to move back home with their parents because of the lack of affordable housing, and they're saving up money to buy their first places. And I thought, okay, that's the way in. Barry will have two kids in their 20s who move back in the way me and Mike McGlone moved back in with Jack and Molly in the first film. Um, so then I also thought, well, what do I do with Connie? Connie and I have remained great friends. We've worked together a bunch of times. Connie has become, a big star now. And I was like, well, I have to give her a bigger role. So I was like, well, I'll make her a widow, and she'll be kind of the third sibling in this story. So I called up Connie, told her my idea, and she was like, love it, get to work on the script. And fortunately, Warner Brothers and HBO Max said, we love it. And, here we are 30 years later.
Yeah, awesome. What a journey it sounds like, but I'm so
Yeah,
glad it all happened and that it turned out so good. That's awesome.
thanks.
Connie, I'm curious how you kind of reacted to all of this when you first heard that there was gonna be a sequel. Because I mean, 30 years ago, did you ever think there was gonna be like a time in your life when you were reprising this role? And what was kind of your first reaction when you read the script and realized kind of what was in store for your character this time around?
30 years ago, I couldn't have imagined that anybody would even see the first movie. Literally, like we made that movie for no money. Like we thought, I thought, well, maybe I'll get like a film reel from it or something. Like maybe, but probably not even. And then, then it won the grand jury prize at Sundance. Couldn't have expected that. Couldn't have expected that would open up the opportunities to have the kind of great fortunate career that I've been able to have. And so no, none of this was anticipated, but what a brilliant opportunity. Eddie for me set the bar from the very beginning in terms of how I love to work and the kinds of stories that I love to tell. And so to be able to revisit these characters 30 years later feels like such an amazing opportunity and so much fun. Like it really feels, and particularly with my character in the movie, um, she really has a very interesting modern woman's journey. And it's like when do you ever get to see a character go through 30 years time and to see how they change? And um, it all feels again really authentic. And I think it's going to be very watching the sort of transformation of Molly's character will be very resonant for a lot of women, I think,
Yeah.
in a really fun way. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I had a lot of fun watching the movie, and I just kept thinking, like, this is probably so much fun to make. Like, it looks like everyone's having such a good time.
So much
It totally
fun.
comes across. Ed, I also really want to like ask you about the kind of holiday setting and theme for this movie, because that's new. I mean, you obviously directed other movies that have kind of been set around Christmas time in the past, but what was kind of the inspiration to take the sequel to this time of year? Like, what did you think tapping into like the Thanksgiving, Christmas season, what did you kind of think that added to the movie?
Well, when I kind of came up with the title, right? Like I kind of told you a little bit of where the story started, and I didn't want to call it Brothers McMullen 2 because of sort of killing off one of the brothers. So when
Mhm.
I fell on the Family McMullen title, that kind of gave me the idea of th starting the movie on Thanksgiving. That is when families typically come together. And then I came up with the idea of like maybe bookending the movie with another Thanksgiving where, these folks, when we meet them, nobody's in a good relationship or in a relationship. And I like the idea that when they come together, we jump forward to a year later, they're all back together and a new McMullen family has been formed, if you will. So it's nice when you write a script and you have your beginning and your end and you kind of know what you want. Then the fun is, well, what's the journey I'm going to put them on? And that's kind of where the whole holiday theme came from.
Sure, totally. And I loved it. Put me right in the Christmas spirit. So big fan of that. Connie, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but the Brothers McMullen was like your first big leading role in a Hollywood movie, right? Like
Yeah.
30 years ago, yeah. And since then, you've been in all kinds of projects that I've absolutely loved. I mean, a big White Lotus fan, big American Horror Story fan. But I'm curious if there was like any specific lesson that you kind of learned on the set of the Brothers McMullen that you kind of carried with you to the rest of your career. Like, was there something that kind of happened there that influenced how you approach the rest of your projects?
So many things. I mean, honestly, like as I was saying before, Eddie really set the bar for me in terms of how my favorite ways to work. Eddie is incredibly collaborative. I love working with writer directors. It's such an exciting experience because you're working with somebody who they have the complete vision of what the film is, and so you feel like you're just helping them to complete this vision. And I love it too. And Eddie sort of showed me how you can do this, like be super collaborative because he's the writer. He would say to us like, what do you think your character would say here? Because he wants to deepen it and like understand who his characters are too. And like we really work together to build that. And that to this day is still my favorite way of working. And also the other thing that I still hold true and is still one of my favorite things is just working with friends and with people that you love and working with people who really just get so much joy from storytelling, because that's what it was when we made this movie in the very beginning when we didn't think anybody would ever even see it. We were just doing it for the joy of it and for, how fun it is to tell stories and create something together.
Yeah, totally. That makes total sense. And Ed, kind of bouncing off that, I mean, the Brothers McMullen was the first movie you directed, and I'm kind of curious how the experience to directing the Family McMullen compares to that. Because I mean, 30 years have gone by, a lot's changed just in Hollywood in general. But what is like, how is it? Was it easier this time around now that you kind of have some more movies under your belt, or was this still like a big learning experience?
Oh, it's definitely easier. Like if you haven't learned anything in 30 years, you got an issue. But I'd say really the big difference was you got to understand when we made McMullen, like we were all kids.
Mhm.
Nobody had ever been on a film set before, and we had a three-man crew. Like there are scenes that Connie had and that I had where we're literally holding our own bounce card and acting with a reflector in your hands.
Yeah.
Um, uh, we shot in the house I grew up in. Every location in the city we stole. We shot it in 8 days we shot 12 days over the course of 8 months. So it was like I'd raise a little money, I'd call Connie and say, okay, I got the camera on Saturday afternoon. Can you meet us on the corner of Central Park West and 86th Street? We're going to shoot a scene. And that's how we would put it together. So this obviously a very different experience, but with that, there's a scene in the beginning of the film where me, Connie, and Mike are together in the kitchen, and it's the first scene of the movie. And even though there was, a giant crew there that day, when you're doing the scene, you're only in the room with the two other actors. And there were moments where we were back in, my childhood home making the first film. That's what it felt like. So